Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I believe this is episode 4 of the Data Squad. Just for those of you who don't know a little bit about the Data Squad, it's a program where Mike and I are joined by experts from the industry to walk through solutions to your big data challenges. And this week, we're focusing on migrating your sensitive data to the cloud. Data Squad is meant to be interactive, so any questions you have or collaboration, please feel free to chime in. It's encouraged. So why don't we get started? Let's go around the table and introduce our hosts for today's Data Squad. My name is Ethan Newman. I'm an applications engineer here at ALTR, meaning I get to work on cool projects in research and development as well as product integrations. And Mike, I'm going to pass it on over to you.
My name is Mike Kravick. I'm a solution architect at ALTR, so I help customers become successful with ALTR and have it work within the ecosystem. And one of our favorite partners is with us, and I'll hand it over to John.
Thank you, Michael. Really nice to be here. Yeah, my name is John Bagnall. I'm a product manager at Matillion. We are a world-leading ETL, ELT platform and solution. I work on our core ETL product, as well as, probably more specifically, I work along the data governance integrations, data security integrations here on our ETL product that we offer. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. Looking forward to chatting.
Great. And to kick it off, really and a lot of what we try to do is get from the high level and then right down to being able to execute on what those high level needs are. And the thing that we're talking about today is avoiding risk when migrating sensitive data. And with that, I'd like to start off with a question for the audience. Feel free to either just type it into the chat. What areas, when you are migrating sensitive data, what is the fear? What is the risk that you're looking to handle? Is it a matter of the people that are migrating? Are they, is the issue whether or not they would be able to access that sensitive data? Is it exposure when you're migrating, especially to the cloud? So that path can be quite unknown from going from on-prem to the cloud. So feel free to throw your thoughts in there, and we can try to either answer those questions and highlight those as we're going through the rest of the session. And actually, hey, John, any thoughts on that on your side too? What are you hearing from customers with concerns when migrating sensitive data?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because of the space that Matillion's in, which is Matillion ETL is our core product, but it's perversely called ETL. It's actually an ELT solution, which for those that might not know the difference, ETL is obviously you extract from a data source. You transform it within the environment to which you've extracted it, and then you load it into a warehouse or whatever the target data source might be. So that's the traditional use. But actually, what Matillion does is it extracts from whatever data source that you are that is originating from. So it ingests from a file or an application or an API, a database, etc. And then it leverages the cloud data warehouse power, flexibility, scalability to do the transforms actually within that environment. And then we go off and load it to wherever it may be. So when it comes to sensitive data and handling sensitive data within that ecosystem, I think the question often is around if we focus on personas, for instance, Matillion is aimed at the data engineer and the data scientist, and it's what are they allowed to have access to, and what are they allowed to manipulate within that process? And if we broaden it out and talk about a data governance policy, it's often quite nebulous in some regards, really, in the sense that, well, we're kind of 1 foot, if we think of it as an umbrella, and Matillion's kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out, because we need to ingest data. We don't know what that data looks like at that point, but we also don't want to expose sensitive data, but we also want the data engineer to be able to get that data into a useful, into a position that it's useful. And really, what we're seeing is that we're seeing that when governance policies are in place, that data needs to be still usable, but also not available to the eyes to which it's not supposed to be viewed. And this is really where kind of ALTR comes in and solves that problem for us, because depending on to which point you ingest the data, it's tokenizing it from that point. So the data engineer doesn't have a view of the sensitive data to which it's transforming or attempting to load it into an external warehouse. So it's kind of still very much quite an abstract area, but it's definitely something that we are exploring further. And what we're finding is that when we use a tool, ALTR as the example, it really does solve the sensitive data problem for Matillion, because it's just not it's tokenizing the data, and Matillion is not concerned of what's actually inside them tables. It just wants to move it into the place it's supposed to go, right, and transform it in a way that it makes it useful. So yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah. So, and then as far as protecting that data, there are a couple of typical options. And I talking to customers, I do see like an overlap of understanding of all the different options. And the three key ones are doing encryption, another one is hashing, and the last one's tokenization. A lot of people usually people will consider it all as encryption, but that's really not the proper way to look at it. Encryption is just when you're encoding the data. So you have a key and you're encoding it, just like you would encrypt a file. This can wind up being multiple records or many records and tables. So if you need to get one record out of that data set, you're going to need to decrypt the whole thing. And hashing works slightly different. It just essentially goes through an algorithm and replaces all of the values with just a long string of characters, essentially called the hash. And that gives you some advantages where you'd be able to at least operate on the data, but you can't unhash data. So what I've seen customers do is take sensitive data and actually have a hash table, and that's what they share to the masses. And then people can work with the hash data because it's safed off. There's no way they can figure out what the original data is, and there's a little wink there because there are ways to hack at that. But the net effect of it is, and kind of to what John was talking about, you'd have to do your ELT of unhashed data, then hash it into an additional table. Now you've doubled the amount of data that you're trying to store. That brings in tokenization. And it's almost like taking encryption and hashing and taking the best of both worlds out of them and then providing them into a single solution. Tokenization provides just essentially an arbitrary replacement of a value to a token, which is a string of characters. They can be deterministic. So you're going to take a value and tokenize it. And if you take the same value, you will see the same token. So that makes it really advantageous to be able to work on that data, just like hash data, but you can detokenize. And the two scenarios that I've seen with customers is either just trying to tokenize data because of the migration to the cloud, and we're going to show a little bit about that today, but then also more of a concept of end-to-end tokenization. So, and that's really where people are using the data, that's going to wind up being tokenized, and then they'll detokenize at the absolute last minute. And that can be either through just regular analytics, BI reporting, as well as data science, and any other kind of advanced analytics, because you don't really need to know who the person is if you're running a machine learning model on that group, or that group to train your model. And then when you're scoring your model, you can get your results, and then at the last minute figure out who they are, and now you have those people who you're going to be providing some action on. It brings us to Ethan. Let's let's actually get some work done. And what we'll do is, Ethan, if you don't mind sharing your screen, we're going to go through what it would take to tokenize data using Matillion, and actually do a workflow or a job of taking data from Postgres database and sending it over to Snowflake, and really all of the nuts and bolts that you would need to collect and put together to make that happen.
Yeah, so here I've got just an empty database in Snowflake. I've done a little bit of work here that I'll come back to. I've just set up tokenization pretty much. It's just a couple external functions that call out to our tokenization API. And then I've got just a stored procedure that wraps that and does that update. And that's about all the setup I've done. So I'm going to create a new job in Matillion and grab that data from the Postgres database and migrate it to Snowflake.
You're on mute, Michael.
You can see my list moving. Thank you. While Ethan is doing that, what we're going to be doing in Matillion is setting up an orchestration job. And John, feel free to throw any commentary that you'd like. But the whole idea is just making it easy to get data from on-prem and bringing it to the cloud, which is something that Matillion has done for, geez, a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so much so that we actually created a separate product which was dedicated to essentially the E and the L aspect of ELT, which is the Matillion data loader, which essentially extracts and loads data, moves data from one place to another, but does it in a very performant and expands the functionality of that movement of data, such as being able to have CDC or change data capture capabilities within that as well. So yeah, extract and load is definitely a 100% a strong point within Matillion's arsenal, but the transformation is no no sloppy area either. We do that incredibly well, and I think that's what's great about tokenization, because as you mentioned, Michael, deterministic tokens allows us to perform certain actions on that table into which that exists, without actually damaging the integrity of the data itself. So I know you went through the encryption and hashing methods to that you mentioned, and tokenization, that's why it kind of works for Matillion, in that regard.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder to everybody on the call, feel free to throw questions, comments in the chat. If you are shy, if you are not shy, just unmute yourself and start talking. More than happy to change direction, answer your questions, or explain something if we need to go over something again. Quick question to the audience too. This is one thing that when we were kind of kicking around this idea and going through the setup was talking about sensitive data and how much transformation do people or do teams need to do with sensitive data. So if you have any comments on that, feel free to type it in the chat. Really like to hear that. And the reason why we're asking is we don't see a lot of customers doing transformation on sensitive data, mainly because it's so hard to access, and that might be one of the challenges. So what we're really looking to do is make it easy for people to analyze data and reduce the risk at the same time. It's not a zero-sum game where you lose one when you try to gain another. So you can get the best of both worlds. But to add a bit of commentary, because Ethan is just hammering away, he really and for those of you that have not seen Matillion, it's really easy to use, which is a challenge when you're watching it because stuff is happening really fast and you don't know what's going on. But really that RDS query is what's loading the data from Postgres. And actually, I'll leave it to you, Ethan, just to explain what that.
Yeah, definitely.
What that component does.
So this, I've configured a couple settings in here to you set the endpoint of the database. So we've got like a Postgres database here. You set the name of the database and the username and password, and then just the query of, so I'm just selecting all from a table. So I'm just going to load one table into Snowflake, this customer dimension table.
Yeah, hit the perfect.
Yep. And that's got some data in here like social security numbers. It's got some keys in here, some names. So all sensitive data we want to lock down. And I also set this target table. So this is the name of the table that's going to be created in Snowflake. It's also customer dim. And then after that's loaded into Snowflake, I've also set a SQL script, and that's just going to call a stored procedure called ALTR tokenized demo, and that'll tokenize whichever column we set it to. So right now I've got it set to this one of the columns with keys in it. And all we're going to do is kick off this job, and it'll grab that table from the Postgres database, load it into Snowflake, and then tokenize it. Hopefully, if all goes well.
Yeah, quick reminder, we're kind of doing this without a net. So we're, a lot of these things, we may see some mistakes, we may need to do some troubleshooting, but that's all the part of working with this kind of modern software. And there is a question from Dave on the chat, and questions for you, John. With your customers, is data governance increasingly important given the increasing use of the cloud? Also, what cloud data warehouse destinations does Matillion support?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first part, definitely. So I've been working on data governance integrations for Matillion for nearly the past year. It started, we have a great relationship with Calibra, and I know that I also have a good relationship with Calibra as well, and other data governance tools, and it's definitely appearing more in sales conversations. The appetite for establishing policy for organizations is definitely increasing. It's becoming not just outside of the sort of compliance areas, GDPR in Europe and the various other flavors around the world. It's just becoming data governance is becoming an asset in organizations, because it's essentially a way of being able to give access to data across departments. So people are seeing it as a removal of a bottleneck. Before, in the past, it might be that the finance department need a particular access to a report or whatever, and tools such as Calibra and ALTR as well as an extension allow that access to be available for them to just query the data themselves. And that's obviously part of the data governance policies that organizations put in place. So we definitely see it as part of our sales calls. I'm definitely getting more requests for joint demos with Calibra and our other governance partners such as ALTR as well. So it's definitely increasing as people move to the cloud. And also as well, the addition to the cloud just adds that extra level of governance needed. I mean, we know that the cloud is a safe and robust area to use software, but for a lot of organizations, specifically financial, for financial and healthcare, things like that, it's still definitely a concern. And in terms of cloud data warehouse destinations, Matillion support, we support all Databricks, Snowflake, Azure, Synapse, Google BigQuery, Redshift, all your main players. Yeah, you can ask a follow-up, Dave, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I can't type fast enough, so I'll just do this verbally. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you'd mentioned the data catalog world and ALTR in the same sentence, and I'm just curious about your perspectives on the the definition of data governance, because some folks like to call data governance just kind of knowing your data and classifying it and having lineage. But we define data governance as having a policy where you can control and protect it. And, actually, if you look in Webster's dictionary, that's more the proper definition of governance, is actually controlling it. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, because it's, bundling kind of knowing your data with controlling and protecting is maybe just a loose definition of governance. At least it is, in our vocabulary.
Yeah, I agree. I think it all lies at access control and, giving people who are allowed to have the access. And if they don't have the access, then give them a reason why they don't have the access, and then follow that up. But I think from Matillion's point of view, what we want to be is we want to be an enabler. We don't want to slow down data governance policies. We want to be able to, and lineage is a massive part of that, Dave. We obviously work from various source and target information. We want to provide that visual representation of lineage for customers to use. So in terms of and it kind of goes back to my first kind of nebulous understanding of where does an ETL tool fit into a data governance policy, and I do think that's quite an abstract understanding, because we ingest data and we move it into somewhere else, but where does that data engineer fit within that data governance policy?
Right.
So the catalog is really just and it's mainly the lineage offering that these governance platforms provide. So it's definitely a great question, and a lot can be pulled from it.
Right. Thank you for your perspectives. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Mike, you're muted again.
You're on mute again, Mike.
I'm on mute again. I am totally off my game. So yeah, thanks for that, Dave. And Ethan, I think we have loaded our records. We did a sample 5,000 record count. Not big data by any means, but
so
a half-hour session.
The column that I tokenized here was this finance column. So we've got like 300 here, but if we go look in Snowflake, we'll refresh this, take a peek at what's in here. Now we've got just random unreadable values here, and we could do this for any column. We could do this for social security number. We could do this for email. But the reason why I wanted to do it on this key is we have another table that has these same keys on it that we can do a join on. And since these are deterministic tokens, meaning if I tokenize Apple, it'll give me ABC. If I tokenize Apple later on, it'll also give me ABC. So we can do joins on IDs and things that way. So I'll go ahead and I'm just going to do a little bit of modification here and get that other table set up.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just doing joins. So it's really just replacing that value for that key consistently with another value. So if you were looking for count distincts on a fact table, that would certainly work exactly the same. Where clauses and other things like that. So there's lots of uses for tokenized data. One of the things that we've heard from customers that use our tokenization, they really don't need to detokenize the data that much. So it's not like it's a process that you have to constantly go back and forth on. You can keep that data protected for a long period of time. It's largely useful. And only when you need to expose who that person is, and even let's say it's an email address where you have the data tokenized and at the last minute, there's maybe 1% of your customers you want to send an email campaign to. You can keep those emails protected until the last moment where it needs to get detokenized and then get sent out. And similar thing with phone numbers for SMS type of marketing campaigns.
Right.
Yeah.
That buy enough time there, Ethan? Or I'm sorry, John, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's what's great about ALTR is that, the mechanism to detokenize is really straightforward. We mentioned in a previous conversation about, having to transform sensitive data. And let's say that you had to, no, we don't have a great deal of use cases to have to actually transform sensitive data, but the policy can be, the detokenization is done very, very swiftly in Alta's very nice UI. For a period of time, it can be within a container. You allow that data engineer to do what needs to be done. It can be even someone actually overlooking that particular process, and then it's tokenized again, which is just, it kind of speaks to how the relationship between Matillion and Alta, which is straightforward, low code, no code. As you can see here, you know, Ethan's just doing drag and drop components. It's very straightforward. Gives you plenty of opportunities to know where you're going wrong or where you're going right, and similar to what Alta does. So yeah, it's a good partnership in that regard.
Great, thanks for that, John.
Okay, so I've loaded in that new table. We've got this X customer SK column that I've tokenized as well, and this has IDs in it that match the ones in the customer dimension table. So I've tokenized that as well, and we'll go in here and take a look. So now we've got tokens here as well, and we can do a join on this. So I've already got one written up here. We're just going to use the email from the customer table, and then the like a date time of the transaction from the transaction table, and I'll run that, and so we can join on those tokens, so those, even though you can't see what those values are, it's still usable for things like analytics.
Yeah, I think the great thing about it too is that even if the data was not tokenized, the SQL would have been the same.
Exactly.
Which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're actually coming on a couple of minutes before the bottom of the hour. I just wanted to open it up to anyone else for any questions, comments, or thoughts, things that you wanted to see but maybe didn't. Happy to hear those as well. All right, we've got a very shy group, but thanks everyone for coming. John, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate getting support from a great partner like Matillion. Enjoy your North Sea and the weather over there, and we will meet up again eventually one time.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Great. Have a good day.
Pleasure. Take care.